What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to my channel. If you know, like, I'm subscribed to this channel with somebody, uncle, auntie, nephew, neighbor, it don't matter who or one. Share this channel with somebody. Now, I'm doing this video for y'all. Not for me, for my sake, for y'all and y'all's sake. I feel like, honestly, if the people from Squid Games was to come at my door right now and tell me I have to survive just for my life, I feel like I can easily do it. I feel like I can easily beat Squid Games. Easily. But I'm gonna do this video for y'all because y'all need the help. And y'all need so much more. Then I'm gonna just do it for y'all. Let's just get into this video.
Found yourself in the latest Squid Game, putting it all on the line to win a little cash. Well, listen up, friends. I've got the strategy guide that will help you beat all of the games we see in Season 2. The real question is, will you survive?
Yet, so let's just see.
Mild spoilers for the games in Season 2, and I apologize for the Korean names I'm going to be butchering. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Film Theory, the show that wants to play.
I don't even know who won
Season 1. If you can't scroll down and hit subscribe in 5
honesty.
seconds, I win. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, how'd you do? I hope you didn't get eliminated. So, Squid Game. If you were somehow living under a rock and missed Netflix's biggest original series in history, first off, that's impressive. I mean, the show and its scathing critique of the rich, watching the poor literally put their lives on the line for just a taste of wealth, really resonated. And a lot of people, us included, made content about it or celebrated that message, which everyone definitely 100% got, because it was so clear. Like, who could watch Squid Game and think it was actually a good idea to turn this premise into a real reality show where desperate people play these games and end up getting put through allegedly awful conditions? No one's that out of touch, right? Oh, come on! Anyway, if you somehow don't know, Squid Game is a Korean series all about a few hundred players that are taken to a remote island and forced to play a series of seemingly innocent and childish games. The twist? If you lose, you die. But the more people who die, the bigger the pot of prize money that the winners get. Season 2 of the show follows Gi-hong, the only survivor of the games from Season 1, as he returns to the game, attempting to stop it from the inside.
What I want is to stop it.
No, I saw the first episode.
But of course, that means there's a whole new slate of challenges for the new players in Season 2 to face, because, I mean, you can't just have a season full of the same challenges again, right? In an older theory, we actually went over the best strategies to win all of the games from Season 1. But now that Season 2 is here with a ton of new games, both on the island and off of it, I wanted to return to the series and imagine, how would you survive the new Squid Game? If you met the salesman and got shipped off to this island, what are the best strategies to actually make it through? Well, loyal theorists, I did the research and put together a handy-dandy little strategy guide to help you get off the island with just a little extra cash in your pocket. Don't move, friends. We're about to get the green light for this theory. Okay, so first things first, one of the biggest things we really drove home in that last theory was that the Squid Game is not like the Hunger Games. This isn't a battle royale or deathmatch where only one person can be left standing. There can be more than one winner.
Those who win all 6 games will receive a handsome cash prize.
In fact, working together, building alliances, sharing knowledge, and trying to have multiple winners is the best way to survive and get that life-changing amount of money. Go check out that older theory if you want all the details there, but just keep that in mind moving forward, okay? Now, sadly, that's not to say that all the games can't have losers. For example, the first game we see in the series is actually on the mainland, played between 2 prisoners. The pair are forced to play a variant of rock, paper, scissors called rock, paper, scissors -1, where they throw out both hands and then take one hand away for the final result.
Two-handed rock, paper, scissors. Take one hand back. If the one you keep beats their hand, you win.
But there's an added twist. The loser is then forced to play a round of, how can I say this without you two getting angry at me? Gun gambling.
I saw this
basically,
episode.
they might die if they
to
lose. Now, if you're looking for the strategy on the shooty bang bang part of this, the only real way to win
literally
that particular
after this
game
one.
is not to play. Yeah, that is my professional advice there. It is very stupid, and I'm not touching it any further. But as for rock, paper, scissors, there actually is a lot of strategy we can look into here. The first thing we're going to want to do is figure out which hand to throw out to start with. According to a study at the University of Tokyo, players are most likely to throw out rock as their first move, followed by paper and then scissors. You can use this knowledge to your advantage. Since rock is the most likely first hand to be thrown out by your opponent, you can start with paper to maximize the chances of winning that first round. And if you win that first round, it can start a domino effect. Another study found that if a player wins, they are more likely to play the same hand again. So if you throw out paper and it beats your opponent's rock, statistically, you're more likely likely to throw paper again. Likewise, if a player has lost, especially twice in a row or more, they are far more likely to shift their play to the hand that will beat what their opponent just played. So the loser who threw out rock in that last scenario is far more likely to then throw scissors the next time. So let's think this through. If you won that first round, don't play the same hand again, and instead switch to what would have beaten what you just played. In other words, what your opponent just played. If you threw paper to beat your opponent's rock, they are most likely to throw scissors to next beat paper. So you throw rock and bam, smash their chances of winning. But if you lose that first hand, your opponent is more likely to throw the same thing again. So you should switch to what would beat it. If they threw rock to beat your scissors, it's statistically best to then switch to paper. I know it's a bit confusing, but you get it? Got it? Great. Because we also then have the added complication of -1, where you play 2 hands and then take 1 away. Honestly, a lot of the same psychology plays out, especially given how fast the game goes.
Rock, paper, scissors, -1. Rock, paper, scissors, -1. Rock, paper, scissors.
But there may be a few ways to game this to give yourself a slight edge. First off, never, never, never play the same thing in both hands. This will immediately cut your odds of winning in half. And if your opponent throws out 2 options different than yours, you automatically lose. Next, try to search for any patterns that your opponent is falling back on. For example, humans tend to subconsciously choose their dominant hands when doing menial tasks like this, so it may be more likely that your opponent will choose the option that they threw out on their dominant hand. Try to use that knowledge and also randomly switch up which hand you pick to confuse your opponent. If you combine the psychology of how to win rock, paper, scissors that we just discussed above with this randomness, you'll have the best chance of winning
every
game, every
time I play rock,
take
paper,
part in
scissors
all
from
the
here on
dangerous
out.
games here in Squid
That's
Game.
all I'm
We're
about to
using
do.
the
I'm not
sponsor
playing
for
rock,
today's
paper,
episode,
scissors with
Rocket
nobody
Money.
no
So
more.
as someone who has to watch
Unless
a
we playing
lot
for
of
money.
content for my job,
Unless
I've
we
signed up
playing
for
for
a
money.
lot of these dang
I'm not
subscriptions
lying.
over the
If
years
you're
that
not
it's hard to
playing
keep
for money, I
track
don't
of what I
wanna play no more.
actually have. And I've actually had multiple subscriptions to the same thing before without even realizing it. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that can help you manage your subscriptions, lower your bills, and budget your expenses. Rocket Money scanned what recurring payments I was sending out, identified that I was paying for something twice, and then with just a few taps, they actually even canceled that extra subscription for me. It was like it got eliminated in the Squid Game. But that's not all. Like I just said, they can also help lower your other bills too. You can ask Rocket Money to scan your bills, and they'll do all the heavy lifting talking to customer service to see if there's a better deal out there. True story, but Rocket Money actually negotiated my internet bill to be $30 a month lower on my behalf. Money that I was able to immediately start saving or spending on other essentials instead, like green jumpsuits or black masks. So if you want to start this new year by being smarter about your money, join the 5 million other members using Rocket Money today by going to rocketmoney.com/filmtheorists, or just clicking that link in the description to get started for free. Thanks again to Rocket Money for sponsoring this theory, and let's hop back into the Squid Game. So, congratulations, you've survived the first game. It's just too bad that it isn't even actually part of the actual Squid Game. But now that you've been shipped off to the island, we can start the real competition. First up is red light, green light. The players must move forward across a field while the doll has green light, but you must stop when she says red light. And all of this must be done within a 5-minute time limit. Well, at least in the West. In Korea, this is actually a slightly different game called the Day Hibiscus Bloom. But I digress. The same strategies apply to both. So the absolute biggest thing you have to keep in mind for this game, even if other people around you are getting shot, you cannot allow yourself to panic, to let your fight or flight take over as others die.
No matter what, do not panic. You can't afford to.
And if you don't panic, you actually have a great chance of winning this without a ton of effort. According to Netflix, the recreation of this field for their reality show spin-off Squid Game: The Challenge was 328 feet long, or just under the length of an American football field. Even if the field in the actual Squid Game was double that size, which I'm pretty sure it's not just from eyeballing it, moving at the average human walking speed of 3.25 miles per hour means that you can cover that distance in just over 2 minutes. So the best advice here is to just take your time, be calm, and just walk. And whatever you do, don't run. You're much more likely to either trip or just not stop in time if the doll turns around quickly. It's not worth the risk. Now, I should also address the strategy Gihon instructs the other players to use here in Season 2. He tells smaller players to line up behind larger ones to minimize the chance that they won't be seen moving.
So if you're short, line up behind someone who's taller than you. Single file, like you're forming a conga line.
Now, I'm not sure I would go as far as to say that everyone should play like this, because because it's incredibly dangerous. All it would take is just one person making a mistake or sabotaging other players for several people to die, exactly like we see with Thanos. But if the entire group is playing together to survive, if someone's not playing this like a zero-sum game, this could be worth the risk. At the very least, if you're on the smaller side, moving behind a larger player will help protect you. And if you're a larger player, you could easily start to form alliances here by protecting other players. Either way, it can also tell you the character of other people in the game, which will help you in the future if there are any team activities. Speaking of which, so you've survived the free-for-all red light, green light, but the next game is completely different. The six-legged marathon, where a group of 5 mini-games are played by groups of 5 with their feet all strapped together. So how do you form a team here to maximize your chances of survival?
We need to find a team. That's the next step.
Well, going in, you're not going to know what these games are, so you can't really group up based on the skill sets you think you're going to need. The games could literally be anything. Logic puzzles, tic-tac-toe, drawing, running.
Look, how about that one? Because he looks like a runner? I told you, we don't know if it's a race.
Trying to diversify your skill sets based on the games you're predicting is a fool's errand, so it's better to partner with players that you trust or players with calm heads. If you want an example of that working really well, just take a look at this team. On the face of things, they may not seem like they're that great, but because they trust each other, it really works out. We have Young Sik, who refuses to abandon his mother Guamja, who herself is empathetic and looks out for other players. Young Mi specifically wants to partner with Hyunju, partially because of her heroics in the previous game, and in return, Hyunju inspires confidence in Young Mi during the game, helping them all win. The only odd one out is Seon Nyo, and even she gets the motivation she needs from the other players. They all work together, pool their knowledge and abilities, and end up winning as a result. On the other hand, there's this situation.
I don't trust you. You're nothing. You're dead to me.
Junhee refuses to partner with Myunggi because of their personal history and relationship drama. Now, don't get me wrong, her feelings are entirely valid, but at the same time, Myunggi is very invested in her survival because she's pregnant with their child. This is a situation where putting those feelings aside might be worth it because he desperately wants you to win. Okay, you have your team, but before we hop into the games themselves, we need to talk about the marathon between them since you're going to have your legs strapped to your teammates. How do you best approach this? Well, the players in the show actually figure this out pretty quick, counting their steps out loud. This helps them coordinate so they don't fall over and waste valuable time. Nextly, if you or a teammate fails in the game, don't panic and don't yell. Collect yourself or encourage your teammates, reset the game, and try again. If you need to move forward to collect a piece before you reset, don't bother turning around. It'll be easier and quicker if you just walk backwards, just like we see in the show. And finally, if you're lucky enough to be on a team that goes later on, make sure you watch the other players. Observe what works and what doesn't. Emulate the strategies that succeed and avoid what fails. You have a massive advantage if you're going so late, so use it. Now, let's talk about the individual games here in the six-legged marathon. First up, there's Dakji. You'll recognize this one from Season 1 since it's what the salesman used to recruit people. This game involves 2 paper squares. One is put on the ground while the player throws the other square onto it, hoping to flip it over. So, how do we go about doing this one? Well, your first instinct might be to throw your square as hard as you can onto the other, but this comes with a bit of a risk. To build up the most momentum, you may end up flicking the square and end up hitting the one on the ground with the edge or corner of your square, since this is the fastest and hardest way to throw it. This is actually how professional card throwers do it and are able to cut things with their cards. But that is not the move for this game. It's going to do little to actually flip it, since all of the kinetic energy from your throw is going to be concentrated on just the corner or edge of your square. Instead, what you need to do is focus on trying to slam the face of your square onto the other, towards the center of the paper. This will transfer the maximum amount of kinetic energy over the widest area and focus it down
exactly what I was
squares on the ground can't go down. So instead, the kinetic energy will rebound, helping to bounce the square. Additionally, since the squares are made of folded paper, there will likely be puffy parts from the folds towards the center of the squares. Even if they're small, this will end up creating itty-bitty pockets of air that you can use to your advantage. Hitting this with a large area will push the air down and out of the square, before air rushes back in to fill that space. Doing this with both squares will get you the best rebound of that kinetic energy. We actually see this in the show, though they don't explain why it worked.
Try with it flipped. Use the other side.
Youngmi hits the square flat with the side that's folded, giving it enough energy to bounce and flip. Do something similar, and you win. Great work. Next up, Flying Stone. Here you have a stone, and you just try to throw it at another stone stand several feet away to knock it over, all without stepping over a line. It's a little bit like horseshoes, trying to throw something to hit a target. Honestly, the game here is super simple, and the trick is just to not overthink things. Take your time to aim. Though it works for some players in the show, avoid overhand or underhand throws. You might get more power from those throws, but that's better for long distances than for aiming. Instead, flick your wrist like you're throwing a playing card, basically like the opposite of Dakji. It's also important to remember your placement and your stance, just in case you miss. If you do, it's not the end of the world, and in fact, now you have an idea of the corrections you need to make to hit the stone. If you place your feet on specific parts of the
I would
racetrack
easily
and
pass
use the line
Squid
you're
Game.
not supposed to cross as a frame
This
of
is my,
reference, you can make sure you're in the exact same place for
this
your
my,
second throw
like,
if you
key to,
miss.
like,
It's also worth
eating
noting
it.
that the rules here
The
are
main
vague.
call,
We see a couple players win this
trust,
challenge
like,
despite
trust
bouncing the throwing
little
stone off the
main
ground.
call.
So if you're concerned about your throw being powerful and
Trust
accurate enough to
who
knock over the
you
other
can
stone, it may be
actually
worth
trust.
tossing the stone lower to the
And
ground
just
and
take your
flicking it
time
like
with
you're trying to
everything.
bounce a pebble
You
on a
don't need to
lake
be
instead of
first.
just lobbing it.
You don't
This
need
will
to
get you
finish it,
more
like,
horizontal
ASAP.
force in a more controlled direction
cool,
and
you
hopefully
know.
enough momentum to knock over the standing
Take your
stone.
time.
Okay, that's 2 out of the 5 mini-games won. Great job! Now, we get to Gongi, which is similar to the Western game of Jacks. Here you have small stones that you need to pick up in bigger and bigger groups as you throw others up into the air. So, picking up 1 stone at a time, then 2, 3, then all 4. It's a bit of a complicated game. I'd recommend checking out a tutorial like this one from Miss Vicky if you want to learn the ins and outs. Traditionally, Gongi is considered a game for schoolgirls, but that shouldn't be an assumption you make when choosing who to play this. Instead, choose either the most dexterous person or the person who has the most practice with the game. We see this in the show. It makes no sense to put Junhee on this game just because she's a girl, when Daeho is both dexterous thanks to his background as a Marine and has a lot of experience with the game thanks to growing up with a bunch of sisters. The main thing to make this game easier for yourself is going to be trying to keep the stones as close together as possible, so you don't need to move your hand in a large distance to pick them all up. Notice in Miss Vicky's video here where she goes for the stones closer together when she needs to pick up groups of 2 stones at a time. Then when she needs to pick up 4 at a time, she lays them as closely together as possible. That way, she's not trying to zip all around and pick up everything across the whole game board while
So
the
how do
stone
you
she
do it?
threw is up in
Okay,
the air.
throwing
Finally,
up,
if your team is lucky
throwing
enough to go
pitch, now
after
you
a
got
bunch of
to
other teams, there's nothing to say you
now you
can't
got 3,
practice while you
you
wait.
throw,
You should
now you got
absolutely
4,
take this time to pick up small pebbles
now
and
you got
play a bunch of
5.
practice
Is that how you
building
play
up
the
your
game?
muscle memory for the
that how
actual
you play
game
the
when the
game?
pressure's on. Now that you've beaten Gongi, the rest of the games are actually going to be much easier. Case in point, next up we have Spinning Top. Here you'll have to wrap a string around a top, launch it, and then have it land all while spinning. It's basically like Beyblade. Tops like
That's
this
easy.
work due to the principle of conservation
easy.
of
I used to
angular
play that all the
momentum.
time
Basically,
growing up.
when an object is spinning,
Easy.
it will continue to spin on that same axis unless stopped by something else, like friction or gravity. The axis of the top is its tip, so as long as you can get it to land on that point while it's spinning, it will continue to spin and you'll win the game.
Easily.
Just keep calm and keep your hands steady as you wrap up the top. You're also going to want to use your dominant hand when throwing the top to maximize the amount of control you have. We actually see the front man using his right hand, his non-dominant hand, while trying to throw this game and make Gihon lose before he switches to his left hand and immediately wins. Also, similar to Flying Stone, this one will be much easier if you release the top lower to the ground. You'll have way more control of
Way
whether
more
it'll land
control.
on its tip and
I'm
keep
telling y'all,
spinning
bro,
rather than just
put me
throwing
on
it
this show.
wildly up into
Put
the
me
air,
in a
giving it a
real-life
chance to
video game.
rotate and
Coming
land on
back.
its side.
Coming back.
Honestly, this
No
is
worries.
probably the easiest
No
game by
worries.
far, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. You could tell that they had to manufacture drama with this game precisely because it was so simple.
Yeah.
Young Yu is traumatized by seeing blood on the ground and freaking out, and the front man tries to sabotage Gihun's group by intentionally failing. Just seems like it didn't fit with the other games and the skill they required, but I digress. Anyway, this brings us to the final game of the 6-legged race, Jeggy. This is basically kind of like hacky sack here in the West. To win this game, you need to bounce a paper Jeggy off your foot 5 times, with your foot touching the ground in between each bounce. Now, most people might think that you should go about hitting a Jeggy or hacky sack with the side of your foot, which does have the potential to launch it much higher into the air. But this also comes with a lot of risk. It makes it much harder to control where the Jeggy is going and might make it more likely that you'll lose your balance and fall down. So instead, hit the Jeggy with the top of your foot. This has a much larger surface area for a potential hit, and by lifting your foot directly up instead of angling it, it's going to be
I
much
used to do
easier
that
to
all the
control
time
where it's
growing up
going,
playing
especially
football.
if you
Like,
just
even
want
when
it
I
to
still
go
see, like,
straight
a
up.
ball,
The physical
football,
movement of this is
basketball,
also much quicker,
baseball, just
easier,
anything,
and
golf
conserves your
ball,
energy.
tennis ball.
Using this method,
I
hitting
do
the
the
Jeggy
same
5
exact thing.
times should be a cakewalk. So
I used to play
great job.
kicker in
Give
high
yourself
school,
a
so
round of applause because
when
you
you
just
play, like,
survived
them
the
type of
6-legged
positions,
marathon. Like but it also
Pause,
means that
okay.
you've made it to the third and so far
you learn
final
this
game
type
of
of
Season
stuff.
2,
You learn
Mingle.
this stuff.
In this game, the platform at the center of a large room will spin, and when it stops, the announcer will call out a number. At this point, all of the players must split off into groups of that many players and enter smaller rooms all along the walls. If you aren't in a room by the end of 30 seconds, or have too many or too few players in your room, you lose. Alright, so this game's a bit tough and might test alliances, but this is where the idea of there being multiple winners of Squid Game not being a zero-sum game is really gonna come in clutch.
This
Now,
game
your
might
first
be
thought
good,
here might be to have an
but I ain't
alliance
gonna lie
with
to
enough
y'all.
people that could
I
manage
might
to
run in
evenly
there
split
with a few
between
people.
all the numbers that they could call.
I might
But
have
that
to run in
just isn't
somebody's group.
realistic. In the show, the numbers they call out are 10, 6, 4, 3, and 2. Out of those, the fewest number of players in an alliance you'll need to survive every possible combination is 60, which just frankly isn't going to happen considering the tensions amongst the contestants already. But consider this, that 10 is far and away the outlier of these numbers, and between all of the other numbers called out during the game, the lowest common multiplier is actually just 12 players. Finding an alliance that can work with just 12 is much more achievable, but it's a bit of a moot point because you're not going to know the numbers that are called out before playing the game.
true.
So, what do? Well, easy. Still work with your alliance. Even if you don't know the numbers going in and just have an alliance of like 9 or 10 people that you trust, like, say, 2 teams from the 6-legged marathon that like each other, assuming that any number they call out is going to be 12 or fewer, that's going to be very easy to work with. Like, sure, not all of them. It's not going to evenly divide amongst any possible number called out, but most of them will. And that really shouldn't be an issue because of the sheer
This is
number of
like-
people that are going to need to
I
be
ain't
in a
gonna lie
group.
to you,
You can just
I was
grab a
just telling my
straggler or
friend,
two
too.
that aren't in another group
I'm like,
if you
if
need
I
more
was
people,
ever
loan
on,
some
like,
of your own people to
Saw,
another
like,
team if you
Jigsaw,
have too many. Hell, you
Squid
might even
Game,
make some new
just
allies
anything.
out of this
I'm
because people are going to be
overly
grateful for
confident
you
I
and
can
your team for
pass with
saving their
flying
lives.
colors, like,
For example, consider this. Let's say you have
these
10
games
players in
aren't
your
that
alliance and the
difficult.
announcer
It's
calls
just
out for
people
6.
panic
You
so
split your
much.
team
When you
evenly
panic,
into
you
2
don't
groups of
think and
5.
you
That
don't
means
think
that each
fast
group
start to
only
happen.
needs to find
The
one
main
additional
cool
player to
calm,
bring in.
collected,
It's
you
much
know, be a
easier for a group
player.
of 5 to attract 1 extra person with
You
no
gonna win
group
it
in
every
this scenario
time.
than it would be for a group of like 2 or 3 to find 3 or 4 extra people. The same goes for if the announcer calls 4 or 3 or 8. Splitting your alliance as evenly as you can will yield the best chance that you'll be able to find enough stragglers to fill your rooms. The only real challenges here would be larger odd numbers like 7 or 9. There will be a few stragglers from your alliance that will have to break off, but if they go individually, well, then they're the 1 extra person for another group. And again, it's far more likely that they'll find a room that needs 1 extra person than it would be for a group of 3 or 4 to find a group of 6 or 7.
That's true.
It's all about just breaking the numbers
That
down
is
to as
true.
small and evenly split as you can get.
That's
And
what I say.
there you have
Work
it.
as a
Follow
team,
that
but
advice
work
and
for
you have the
yourself, if
best
you get what
chances
I'm
of
saying.
surviving all of the games
It's
we've
like, you
seen
know,
so
owning
far
a
in
company,
Squid
you
Game
got a
Season
group,
2.
you got your
Though, if
team,
you really
but
want
you're
the
doing it
best
for
advice I
yourself,
can
you
give,
feel me?
just
Like trying to go
don't
pro.
play. I joked about this at the top of the episode, but Squid Game is a
Basically.
brutal critique of the divide between the rich and the poor, and how uncontrolled wealth inequality puts the have-nots against one another for the amusement of the haves. You don't have to give in and play that game, and instead you can try to change the system. Even if that is way harder than it sounds, just like Gi-hoon is learning this season. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Up next on Film Theory.